It's the November international break, which means it's time for us to take stock and look at the Championship League table. But today, we're going to be looking at what the Championship table should look like. Now, what I mean by should look like, it's exactly like what we did in September. We are taking Opta's expected points league table and we're going to compare it to the real one to see which sides should be where based off of the data, and this is how Opta gather them numbers. So they use expected points, which is calculated by using a model that simulates each shot in a match, which is where you get XG from, and it estimates the probability of a team winning, losing or drawing based off of the quality of chances they either have at their own end or they concede in their own. So they get shot on XG values for each team in each game. They then simulate the game multiple times based off of them numbers. I think they simulate each game 10,000 times or something like that. And then they determine the outcomes and divide that by the number of wins, draws and losses a team should have. So basically, they've took all 15 games that your team has had this season. They've looked at the numbers. They've simulated the games 10,000 times each based off of them numbers and come up with an average of how many points your team should have. So on one side, we've got the current league table and how many points each team does have, and on the other we're going to look at how many points they should have, and if your team is either massively overperforming or massively underperforming. Now, I find these numbers really interesting, and I know a lot of people are not big fans of data and numbers, but for me, data always levels out in the end. No matter how much it might look drastically out of range, it gives you a really good picture of how a team's playing, how many points they should have, and normally by the end of the season, they all regress or progress to the average, and they come in and around somewhere where the data says they should be. So if your team's overperforming massively at the minute, I would heed a slight little bit of caution that things might regress to the average as the season goes on. But if your team's underperforming, there might be signs that things might not all be that bad. So starting at the bottom, and the team that should be 24th, and that is Plymouth Argyle with an expected points of just 11.3. By them numbers, they've overperformed this season by 4.7 points. Now, as I say, you can look at that in a positive perspective and say we're overperforming, we've got more points than we should, and points is all that matters. None of this data woke nonsense. But you could also look at that and say that Plymouth have a lot more points than what they should, and comparing them to every other team in the league, they would actually be bottom. They should expected to be bottom of the Championship right now on only 11.3 points from 15 games, which is really, really poor. So if Plymouth keep overperforming, that's absolutely fantastic. But if they do slightly start to regress, and if they start getting the numbers the data suggests, they're going to be in a bit of a pickle by the end of the season. Joining them in the bottom three, in 23rd, we've got Pompey, who are exactly where they should be in the league. However, they should have a few more points. They're expected to be on around 14.92 points, so just under 15 points, which means they've actually underperformed by about a win, about 3 points at the moment. So that's a lick of comfort maybe for Pompey, that they should have a few more points than what they do, but I think that just tells you, even with the really tricky start of fixtures which they had, even with how many points they seemingly have thrown away from winning positions this season, they are pretty much in and around where they should be, which I think paints a really tough but realistic picture on Pompey, and the fact that they should be down there, they are down there rightfully, and that they need to start improving. The final relegated side, who should be in the bottom three, is QPR, and that's probably not a surprise as they are currently bottom of the league with only 10 points, but they have underperformed significantly. They should be on just over 15 points, which means they're 5 points worse off than what they should be. Now again, there's positives to that. QPR fans might think, well, we should be on a lot more points and we shouldn't be as far adrift of the others as we are. But equally, it proves that even with any sort of positive spin you might try and put on QPR, injuries, etc., they still are, regardless of the games, they still are a bottom three side. So although things aren't as bad as what they seem by the numbers, QPR would still be in the bottom three. Just outside the drop zone in 21st, we've got Cardiff City, who are just outside the relegation zone, as opposed to being in it like they are in real life, but their numbers are bang on, really. They're expected to have just over 15.5 points, so they're pretty much exactly where they should be. And I find this really interesting because Cardiff had a really bad start to the season, to which a lot of results you could say they didn't deserve. A lot of results they come out on the wrong side of, where they were maybe a little bit unlucky and the numbers showed that they were actually in a lot of them games, and that's since been followed by a great run by Omar Rizza, which has, of course, dropped off a little bit. So I think all that tells you that despite the ups and despite the downs, Cardiff level out, and they're exactly where they should be. I don't know what that means for Omar Rizza, but they still yet to make a decision on the new manager. In 20th, interestingly, we've got Stoke City. Now, they're sitting, I was going to say high-flying, maybe it is high-flying for Stoke, in 13th on 19 points, but they are expected to only have just under 16 points, which means they've overperformed by around one solitary win. This sort of tells you how tight the league table is, that Stoke dropped from all the way down to 30th to 20th, but I think this sort of tells you that Stoke are in and around where they always are in the Championship. They're not quite in enough trouble to go down, but they're not exactly in mid-table either. Despite the change of manager, they're still sort of hovering in and around an area where they probably feel a little bit uncomfortable. So although a recent upturn in form maybe shows the table to look quite bright for Stoke, their numbers still show they're in the same position they've always been in recent seasons. In 19th, we've got Oxford United, who should have around 16 points, and that's exactly what they're on, near enough. They've overperformed by just under a point, but I think this is a positive for Oxford, and this is where perspective is really interesting from club to club, because I think this proves that Oxford and the points they've picked up so far and the place they're in the league isn't a fluke. It's not that they've scraped by in games, they've gotten lucky, they've stolen points they shouldn't have earned. Every point they've got so far this season are points they should have, and I think that is credit to a team who were wrote off massively at the start of the season, by me included, but the position they're in the league table right now is exactly where they should be, and if they keep doing what they're doing, Oxford United should stay in the Championship. Above them, in a similar manner, we've got Sheffield Wednesday, who have just over 17 points, or should have just over 17 points, but they're actually on 18. So they, like Oxford, and ironically they're just above Oxford in the real-life table as well, they're in and around exactly where they should be, albeit the expected league table has them a little bit lower, which shows there are a lot of sides that are underperforming at this moment in time around them. They are both picking up the number of points they should, and I think that just sort of leans into the very inconsistent up-down season that Sheffield Wednesday have had, which I'm sure is frustrating for their fans, but they've came out of it exactly where the data says they should be. Above them in 17th is Preston. Now, I don't know if this is a little bit of positive for Preston fans. They should have more points than what they do. They're expected to have just over 17 points, but they're actually down on only 15. So I guess they shouldn't be as close to the drop as what they are, but I think this still shows that Preston aren't down there by some ridiculous amount of bad luck, or, you know, that there's been a massive impact from Paul Heckingbottom since he's come in. I think there's been a slight impact, but Preston are still nowhere near that top 10 team they have been in recent times. They're not even a top half team. They are bottom half to sort of bottom three side. But I guess there are positives to suggest that even though they're just hovering outside the drop on goal difference, they should be a few points clear at least. In 16th, we've got the third newly promoted side, and that is Derby County. They, like Oxford, will probably take positives from this. Now, they are obviously 12th in the Championship currently, which is outstanding, really. This shows they have overperformed slightly by around a point and a half, so they should be on 17.5 points as opposed to 19. But I still think this proves that despite a really, really wretched away record where they've not looked very competitive at times, could say they've snatched and grabbed a few results on the road, paired with their home form, they're actually still very, very solid. They're still very, very mid-table. They aren't in a huge amount of trouble, and I think this suggests that we're probably not going to see much of a top 12, much of a playoff push from Derby County this season, but as a newly promoted side, they're performing very, very respectably, and the numbers show. In 15th, this is where things get interesting. We've got one of the biggest overperformers of the season so far. In 15th, we've got Watford. Numbers suggest Watford should only have 17.8 points, but they actually have 25, which means they've overperformed by 6.2 points. And I'm going to let you in on a secret. There are two more teams that have overperformed even more than that. But I don't know what this says about Watford. Now, again, it's great that they have had the start they have, because I don't think anybody expected Watford to be where they are. But they've won a lot of games at home. They've lost a lot of games away. And I think a lot of people are sort of wondering, it's going to go one of two ways. Are they going to shore up at the back and become a good team home and away, use their home form as a platform and basically establish themselves in the top six? Or is this ridiculous home form just too much to sustain? Are they going to drop back inevitably the numbers suggest the latter. It does suggest that Watford have picked up a lot more points than what they should have, and that they really aren't a top 6 team if you look at their numbers, whether that's them being ridiculously clinical, whether that's the teams they've played not taking their chances, I do not know. But if you're a believer in data, and I'm sure a lot of Watford fans will be looking at this and saying they're not, it suggests that Watford will gradually regress to the mean, which would have them in and around mid-table, which is where I thought they would be anyway. But let's see if Watford continue to overperform. But right now, they've got a lot more points than they should. In 14th, we've got Blackburn, who are another significant overperformer, slightly. It says they should have around 19.43 points. That has them overperforming by around 2 points. That's not too much of a surprise. Blackburn had a really, really great start. Don't know how much of that was an overperformance, but they have started to regress recently. They've stopped the slide, you could say, in recent games, but I do see Blackburn, as they have done many, many times in the past. They start incredibly well, but gradually they slide in and around mid-table, and the league has them exactly in that position. So Blackburn overperforming, but only slightly. In 13th, a bit of a jump here, up to 21.2 points. We've got Swansea City, who are underperforming. Actually, they should have more than what they do, and although their league positions are relatively similar, they should be 2 points better off than what they are, and I think that's fine. You know, Swansea are a team I've constantly looked at and thought are just mid-table, they're just kind of mediocre, and they've, I'd say, surprised me slightly, but I'm still not convinced they'll be a playoff contender by any means, although I do feel like they'll be a stronger side who might flirt with the top 6 once or twice, and the numbers suggest that. Swansea aren't the best, they're not the worst, but they're a decent team. In 12th, we've got Hull City. Now, Hull City, and I don't know if this is a sign of patience for Tim Volter, but they should have a lot more points than what they do. According to Hull's numbers, they're underperforming by over 6 points. They should have 21.4 points, but they're down with only 15. Again, this is taken over 15 games, simulated each one of them 10,000 times. So I don't know if this is a whole team that have been very, very wasteful, or maybe a little bit unlucky. Now, I know the experiment apparently isn't working. Hull fans don't like what they're seeing, and although people will argue about data, the eye test is the most important one when it comes to fans. But the numbers do suggest that Hull City, albeit not a top 6 side, still I don't think anywhere near the level they were under Rossini. They're a team that should not be hovering dangerously over the relegation zone as to the level that they are. That maybe the underlying numbers suggest that the job Tim Volter's doing maybe isn't as bad, and it wouldn't take much to maybe get them moving in the right direction. Hull fans, let me know in the comments section below. Talking of another manager who's in trouble, and where the numbers maybe make it look a little bit better, is Luton Town. They're 11th, and equally they've underperformed just as much as Hull have. They should have 21.86 points roughly, which means they've underperformed by 6.8. Now, this doesn't surprise me as much because many, many times I've seen Luton, their forwards, miss some absolutely glorious opportunities in games, and I'm assuming a lot of these simulations have had them chances which have been of high quality. I know Adebayo's one of the biggest underperforming strikers in the league. It's probably had, in most simulations, Luton taking the lead in a lot of these games and maybe seeing them out and picking up a lot more points than what they should this way. So again, like Tim Volter, Rob Edwards, another manager who is under pressure, and I get it. The expected points are pointless when it comes to what's really on the board, and what's really on the board is 15 points and a Luton team that looks absolutely terrible. But numbers suggest they should be better off, and maybe they've been a tad unlucky at times, and maybe that is a lick of comfort for Rob Edwards and his place at Luton Town. But the truth is, they should be doing a lot better than what they are. And the same is said for Norwich City in this bulk of big underperforming sides. They should be 10th on 22.29 points, and they're underperforming by 4.29 points. Of course, they're down in 14th with 18 points at the moment. This is, I think, rather realistic. I've been a little bit sort of shocked by Norwich's recent downturn in form and maybe a slight over-reliance on certain individual players, but I think this just shows that Norwich, yeah, they've dropped off slightly, but they aren't exactly performing at the level of a top 7, top 8 team. They're very, very good at home. I think you look at the Boro game, for example, I'm sure that's a game that on 100 simulations. Might have had Boro winning 99 times out of them, but still, that has Norwich underperforming compared to what they should. They should be a top 10 side, not quite a playoff side, and I think that's where I'd have them right now. In ninth, we've got Bristol City, who are exactly where they should be. Just over 22 points expected, and that's exactly where they are, pretty much in the league. And they're a side who are going about their business pretty quietly, pretty steadily. They seem consistent, although they're drawing a lot. They aren't losing many games. And I think Bristol City might quietly continue to go under the radar, but there's nothing to say they're doing anything drastically better than they should or much worse. Bristol City are performing exactly as they're expected to, and I'd say for them in 10th, that's a positive. In 8th, we've got Burnley. Now, this does not surprise me. Burnley are overperforming in the league currently by almost 5 points. The expected table has them on 22.33. They're on 27, and I'm not surprised by this at all. There were certainly results earlier in the season where Burnley were ridiculously clinical, results where, you know, they scored a lot more goals than what they should have, and maybe the simulations have swung a few results the other way down to that. But I'm not surprised to see that an incredibly clinical Burnley side who've probably come out on the right side of a lot of tight games where they've not created all that much, but they've, like the Swansea game, got a penalty at the end or something, has just propped them up a little bit more than what they should be. And that's why I remain to be unconvinced by this Burnley team under Scott Parker, and their numbers don't even have them in the top 6. So let's see how the numbers maybe even out as the season goes on. And in 7th, we've got the biggest overperformers in the Championship. Now, this could be seen as a positive, as I say, because they've got a lot more points than they should have, according to the data. But if things do regress to the mean and the numbers level out by the time we reach May, this might be a slightly worrying sign, and I know their fans aren't going to like this, but in 7th, it's Sunderland. Now, this doesn't take anything away from Sunderland and the fact that they are on 31 points and they're doing brilliantly at the top of the league, but their expected numbers have them overperforming massively. They should only have 22.76 points, which means they're 8 points better off than what they should be, and that's just interesting. That's just the numbers, and I know Sunderland fans will definitely be looking at this and saying that expected points is a load of bullcrap, and I get that, but I guess this is maybe down to, and this is a backhanded compliment, you know, the number of unbelievable goals Sunderland have scored, the number of incredible volleys and long-range shots they've put away that are probably low-quality shots that if you took another 10 times, you probably wouldn't even score once. I think that might be what swings it in that favour, and maybe they've had games where the opposition have been a little bit wasteful. But the numbers are the same for every single team. The simulations are exactly the same for every single side, and when they put them all alongside one another, it has Sunderland down in 7th, which means naturally there will be a regression. And I'm not surprised by that. I think Sunderland have had an outstanding start to the season. Their squad isn't as strong as I think a lot of the top sides in terms of the parachute teams. And I do feel like with the age of their squad, how they'll go in and out of form, what might happen throughout winter with injuries and stuff like that, the inconsistency of form, the injuries, the squad depth, I think will catch up with Sunderland. I don't think they'll be top 2. I still think they'll be playoffs personally, but the numbers has them just outside. In 6th, we've got West Brom, who are near enough where they should be. They're in 6th currently on 23.76 expected points, just over a point more than what they should have. That's absolutely fair enough for me. West Brom, again, are another side that started ridiculously well. There's been an expected regression, which I think, like I say, will happen to Sunderland, will happen to a lot of teams in this league, but it still has West Brom as a solid playoff team, which I'm not surprised by at all, and I feel like they'll just consistently be in and around where they will, which is going to be playoffs. The numbers suggest that's going to be the case. Corberan's the sort of manager that will just keep them at a consistent level, and that's why these numbers don't surprise me. In 5th, we have another really, really interesting case of another side that has overperformed massively, and this one shocked me. In 5th, we've got Sheffield United. They've overperformed by Opta's data by nearly 7 points. Nearly 7 points more that they've got than they should, Sheffield United. And that puts the top 2 at the moment massively overperforming the numbers that they should. They should have 24 points. They're on 31. Now, I could see it from a Sunderland point of view. I could see where that overperformance was coming from. But I've looked at Sheffield United and I just thought, yeah, they're a solid team. They don't concede goals. Now, I don't know if that's because they've been keeping out incredibly high quality chances, or they've just been edging out games by being incredibly clinical. I do know in a lot of games they haven't created an abundance of chances. They're not actually a very big chance creating side, so I can only put this down to them being stupidly clinical in very, very tight games, which they're coming out on the right side of, whereas in the simulations, they might have tipped the other way on occasion. So interestingly, the top two sides, who by far look like they're head and shoulders, are actually not even that. They're not top two. They're actually in and around the playoffs at best. And like Sunderland, Sheffield United are down as a massively overperforming side. See how that develops going forward. In fourth, you'll notice there's a team that's not been mentioned yet. They're the biggest underperformers by a mile. Close your ears if you're a fan of Coventry City. Now, the numbers have Coventry City on an expected number of points of 24.3, but they're actually down in 16th, meaning Coventry have underperformed by 8 points, which is ridiculous. This, I, again, think I've seen cases of it where in games, in tight games, and I've seen a lot of their results, they've come out on the wrong side of results by the odd goal or what, and I think maybe they've been a bit wasteful in front of goal at times. This has them coming out on the wrong side of a lot of games they should have won. And I think this is a positive sign for Coventry in terms of that a lot of stuff they were doing was right. They should have gotten a lot more results than what they did. And maybe it makes the Robin sacking look even more stupid in the fact that they have the fourth highest expected points numbers in the whole of the Championship. Now, the fact they're down in 17th is a sickener, an absolute sickener if you're a fan of the Sky Blues, but this shows that they should be getting a lot more points than what they have been. Again, if things level out in the season, does go the way we normally expect it to, Coventry will do what they always do. They will pick up points eventually, and they will start climbing the table, because right now, data has them in fourth. In third, topping the playoffs, is Millwall. They should be, with an expected points of 26.49, in third. Now, this just makes me even more impressed with Millwall, because their recent form would have you think that they're just a team that are maybe above where they should be. They've just had a good run, a good purple patch. They shouldn't be where they are. But actually, their numbers show that Millwall should be right up there. They're still 3 points off of where they should be, and that would have them in third. I think that's unbelievably impressive. Now, maybe that just, again, shows how strong their defence is, and maybe even at times they've conceded the odd goal or two, which they shouldn't. Maybe their defence is just rock solid and should have less goals conceded as it should. I'd love to see their XG against compared to the goals they have conceded. But maybe going forward as well, Millwall have been a little bit wasteful. But I think for a team, the squad they've got, the season they've just come off the back of, this is a really, really exciting statistic for Millwall fans. And it shows that their recent form isn't a blip, isn't a fluke. They genuinely should be playoff contenders. And into the top two then, in second, the team who I thought would be the king of underperformers, because we're underperforming in every other metric, it's Boro, who should be second. And it's safe to say Boro and the team top, who you'll know who it is by now, should be out front by quite a bit. And we're both not. Now, we're obviously by far the biggest underperformer of the two, but Boro are 6 points worse off than what we should. We should be on 30 points. We're actually 24 points, 6 points worse off. And as a Boro fan, I see this 100%. We are top of nearly enough every single metric in the league in terms of XG, chances created, shots on goal. We're actually really good defensively in terms of the number of chances we've given up, but we've conceded so many more freak goals than what our defence has deserved. And I think that just shows in the number of points we've thrown away in countless games. And a lot of regular subscribers to my channel who watch my Boro reviews will know that, say what you want about data, this proves that sometimes what you see is reflected in the numbers, because Boro are a ginormous underperforming team who have wasted and thrown away points after points after points, and this proves that. However, from a Boro point of view, I take extreme positives in the fact that we should be top two. If we keep going, hopefully the numbers will eventually level out and we will get there, because we should be top two by at least 4 points by the numbers. That suggests to me that Boro are performing at the level of a top two team. Hopefully the results start to reflect that too. And finally, top of the league, another team underperforming who should be out front outright is Leeds United. And although they're not underperforming by that much, it's only a 3 point drop, they should be on 32 points, and that doesn't surprise me. Leeds are the team, I've said countless occasions, are the team I still think will win the title. They're still the team I think will go on a run, and are still the team I think could just separate themselves from the rest of the league and go and win it by a canter. They're the one team I could predict going on a 8 to 10 game winning run, for example. There's no one else in the league I could back doing that. I feel like once Leeds get going, they won't be able to be stopped, and this proves that there still have been times this season where they've dropped points they shouldn't, but it does have Leeds massively out front with 32 points, still underperforming by 3, and outright top of the league. So before we go, let's have a look at this chart compared to last time, with the biggest overperformers at the top and the biggest underperformers at the bottom, and there is certainly a theme. A lot of the teams that were up there before, overperforming their points tally, are still up there, and the only thing that's changed is the deficit, and that's just because more games have been played. Sunderland were overperforming before, they're overperforming by even more now. Same for a lot of teams like that. Sheffield United, Watford, still right up there. Burnley too. Bristol City have slightly flipped, although they've seemed to be consistent with their numbers throughout the entire of the season. There are more underperforming teams now than what they were before, but the same teams are languishing at the bottom. You're looking at Coventry, who have gotten even worse in terms of points that they're wasting. Same for Boro. Hull are down there too, as are QPR, who have massively flipped on their numbers compared to before. So, yeah, there's a consistent theme with teams that are underperforming, overperforming, and I guess the argument for them teams is if this continues, they're only going to stay where they are in the league, if not cement their place even further. But we'll see if these numbers do level out as we go, and whether the table does end up being the expected one that we've just looked through. But let me know your thoughts on the video. Let me know your thoughts on the numbers. I know a lot of people don't like data, but I find it fascinating to see where teams maybe should be compared to where they are. So let me know what you think of your side and whether that's gave you a degree of hope and optimism, or maybe it's made you worry a little bit by your team's false position. Let me know in the comment section below. And other than that, like the video if you've enjoyed it. We're going to be back with an updated championship predicted league table from me, as well as looking at what the bookies think. We're going to also ask AI to see what AI thinks as well, like we did in the summer. But until next time, guys, subscribe if you've enjoyed the video. Do hit the bell so you never miss when one drops. Leave me a comment below with your thoughts on your team. And until next time, do take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.